Aziz Aneman, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Great Power Rivalry. I welcome you to this exclusive show. And today, again, we have got Tony Gosling with us, and he's joining us. And he is on vacation, actually, enjoying the grey weather. It's getting cold in the UK, so he's escaped. We're not going to tell you where he is, and we're not going to ask him where he is, but yeah, it is a secret. Yeah. With us, everything is a secret, of course. So, Tony, first of all, welcome to the show. I hope you're enjoying the sun.
Yeah, well, the secret is I'm in Croatia. It's gorgeous here. Uh, it's actually the people are lovely. It's just generally a Catholic country, as many Southern European ones are, and you just find the locals so welcoming, so honest. You know, things like the restaurateurs, their family businesses often have been passed on for many generations, and so what you're getting the real deal. It's not like one of these BlackRock style businesses descending in to take over, where you've got 500 different employees within 1 year, which they cycle through the whole time, which is what we're getting in the dark world in the UK, where basically almost all family businesses are being squeezed out wherever they are, whether it's farming, whether it's in the urban situation. So yeah, it's lovely here and also quite sunny.
And how's the food there in Croatia?
Fantastic. Look, I'm not going to moan about it. It's beautiful. And of course, it's lovingly cooked rather than to a deadline or to a price, yeah, fantastic. I really, would recommend it to everyone and anyone, really. Just over the Adriatic, you've got Italy, which is much more in the compass of the European Union, New World Order, whatever you want to call it. And Italy is going down that corporatized fascist route, which Croatia will do, I'm sure, in years to come. But at the moment, they're getting an easy ride from the EU. They're not really pushing all their policies to starve families out of making a living here.
Well, that's something to look forward to. So Croatia is going to be a destination, surely, for us. We can't tell when, but surely it's going to be a destination. So since we've got Tony Gosling with us, we are going to discuss some contentious topics because that's what we do when Tony is with us. And Tony is someone who opens his heart out and who, open our minds up to the things which are deeply misunderstood. He gives us a very unique perspective to look at things and to understand them. And my following and the people who are fond of my programs are fond of Tony Ghosting as well. So I'm always getting your request that when Tony is coming up next. So today so today we'll be discussing, just to give you a teaser of what we are going to be discussing. Today we'll be discussing the last week's I would say, and they're calling it anti-immigrant protests, but I believe they turned out to be racist riots. That's what they were. So we would be discussing that. What's actually going on? What's this divide and rule policy? Driving us at. So that is the first topic. That is going to be the first topic, and then we would be discussing Charlie Kirk murder. Who murdered him? Why did he murder him? Tony's got a unique perspective about it. We will be discussing it. Of course, we will be then touching base on the Israeli attack on Qatar, uh, a country protected by the might of the U.S. defense umbrella. Is that what's going to happen with the countries provided, defense umbrellas or defense guarantees by the U.S.? Is that a new norm now?
Well, it's a bit of a leaky umbrella.
Yeah, definitely leaky umbrella. So we're going to discuss the leaky umbrella, and finally we'll touch down on the what Tony calls the Chinese yin yang, and I call the Great Power Rivalry. What's going on over there, and how the Great Power Rivalry is playing, where Pakistan stands in the entire geopolitical scenario. The Indian role has been really popping up these days because of the tariff war, and then the Indian Prime Minister going to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. That is also a very interesting topic. So going back to the first topic, Tony, what do you make out of this anti-immigrant riots or the racist anti-immigrant protests or the racist riots? What's actually going on? What do you think about it?
You're talking about in London at the weekend. Yeah. So, I mean, just for your listeners and your viewers, I was working at the BBC. This is the sort of perspective I bring. In a way, I've got a weird, unique look at all this because I started working at the BBC in the 1980s when it was a very different organisation. I think if you go back to much 80s material, documentaries, dramas, etc., you'll find it was a very different organisation. The culture that the people who are older than me working there, producers, presenters, etc., news editors, was very much a public service ethos. So the idea was the public are out there, we're on their side, and in fact, sometimes even on their side when it comes to challenging, the cabinet, the central government, etc. And that was the ethos that I was brought up with. And of course, I was covering protests in London. I was working for a station called Greater London Radio, out doing vox pops, this sort of thing in the street at marches like this. and one of my jobs was to count them. You used to wait till everyone's gone past and do a bit of a count, so that because we knew the police lied about the numbers. And so we were there to give the public, here is Greater London Radio, GLR, BBC, here is our figures for the numbers of people there. And so I've been watching these things change over the years. And if you go back to the 1990s and 2000s, you'll find that the nationalist movements in Britain, obviously we've got Welsh nationalists, we've got Scottish nationalists, quite okay. But the English nationalists, there's been a deliberate attempt, as Nick Griffin explains, from the British BNP, British National Party. He was a former leader. The Zionists turned up in the noughties and offered them lots of money to fund them, much as they did to, say, for example, Charlie Kirk in the United States. They have a lot of money to come and fund these political movements, pressure groups, etc. Griffin refused to take the money, and then over a period of months, he was forced out of the leadership because obviously the Zionists were working behind the scenes to put their people in charge. So there's been a real attempt for at least 15 years or so, maybe longer than that, maybe 20 years, in order to sort of hijack, really, all of the pressure groups which have been pushing for the English national benefits for the people, whether it's cultural, whether it's things like employment, job, cost of living crisis, housing, all these things, for British people and English people, to turn that into basically an Islamophobic movement. And that's what we saw on Saturday in London again. But on what I think is the biggest scale ever, because a separate organisation had been set up, which was nothing to do with the Tommy Robinson, former EDL Zionist. And they were many people were bussed and brought into London on the basis of, we want our country back. Now, this wasn't just an anti-immigration group they were bringing in. This is really also a kind of anti-government group, people saying that the country has been very badly managed. And what Robinson has amazingly, managed to achieve is to try and hijack that movement, at least in terms of the press coverage. So if you talk to individuals who went there, they said, "Oh, I'm not interested in Tommy Robinson or his speeches, and I wasn't listening." But the press don't reflect that. The press focus on, Tommy Robinson is the spokesperson for this movement. And unbelievably, Adil, and people like me notice this sort of thing, right? They've been working in this business for a long time. Is that the BBC and other news outlets on the Sunday after the march were putting out excerpts from the speech of Tommy Robinson on the radio so everyone could hear it, right? So that even those that didn't want to hear it can hear it. What you find is
what's the design behind it? Who's controlling the editorial policy there?
Well, look, the mass media is part of the conspiracy. The idea is divide and rule. But the point is, if there's a massive rally of 1 million people pro-Palestine, I guarantee you will not hear a single word from any of the rally speakers on the mass media. So what does this tell you? This tells you that basically the London press, the billions of pounds invested in all these journalists, what they're doing at the very top level, this is the managers and the editors, is they're pushing Tommy Robinson. They're basically like a massive advert for Tommy Robinson, whereas they're suppressing the nuances and the detail of what's being said in the speeches by the pro-Palestinians. So this, if you're looking carefully at this, you can see that millions of people watching and listening on the news, etc., on the day after the rally, wherever they are in the world, on Sky News or BBC, what they'll be getting is basically an advert for Tommy Robinson and an attempt by the press to portray the general national movement in the UK, which, by the way, is timed to coincide with the last night of the Proms, which is a patriotic music festival at the Albert Hall, which has been going for many years. It's going really downhill, really, in terms of quality of music, and also important to mention that the BBC refused to broadcast parts of their live events. They just shut them off, particularly when an Israeli conductor makes a big speech. I mean, you may have seen it about Gaza, saying the whole world, everyone has got to stop this. I live in Israel. I'm an Israeli. I'm Jewish. I am saying everyone has got to do something to stop what's happening, because this is destroying my country. We've got, an insurrection going on within Israel as well as in other parts of that region to get rid of this government of the Israelis. Now, the BBC didn't broadcast that. Why is that? The same as all the embarrassment about Glastonbury. But anyway, so that's essentially, I think, in a nutshell, what's been going on over the weekend. Is lots of people who are just really fed up, not really just with, I think, with the over amount of migrants. Obviously, many people are concerned about the illegal migrants, and also the fact that some of the basic services like the care homes, the basic stuff, all the really basic stuff, even in schools with teaching assistants, the pay is so low that British people can't afford to do it and actually live. So what's happening is there's this massive push of migrants for cheap labour to come in, and which is effectively driving down wages even further, and it's also destroying trade unions. The trade union pay and conditions that trade unions have been working for hundreds of years, or 150 years at least, is being driven down and down and down by mass migration. And so rather than pay British people and English people properly, the BlackRocks of this world, who control the British government these days, they certainly control the Treasury, and they are the ones who are benefiting from all of this, because they're getting nice, cheap labour. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons why people turn out. But it's been hijacked as this anti-Islamic, and the entire way that the Middle East conflict is being framed is not anti-human, which of course the genocide is, but anti-Islamic. This is the way that Robinson and his friends try and frame it. Is, look, it's us or them. The Muslims are the danger, and this is, I think, appalling that the mainstream press, the Billions, the BBC, the ITV, the Sky, etc., go along with this.
So, Tony, you're right. The protests were held, which were turned into riots after being hijacked by Tommies who were there, not Tommy Robinson alone, but the Tommies who were there. They were hijacked, fine, and the protests were based on genuine issues. I agree. Yeah, the problems you're pointing out, they're the problems being faced by the UK today, and they need to be addressed. And we were hoping for after the Tories, we were hoping for the Labour to do something about it. But there are no trade unions anymore, so there is no Labour. Labour is billionaires. Now, coming to the question of billionaires, Tommy Robinson has been clearly supported by the multi-billionaires, by the likes of Elon Musk himself, if not funded by him, but definitely supported by him on the media, social media. And then Tommy Robinson is the Observer did the story yesterday, and they said that the US tech billionaire Robert Shillman, he's tied to Tony Robinson, influencer, far right influencer Tony Robinson. So why are these billionaires like Elon Musk and Mr. Robert Shillman supporting Tony Robinson's far right racist agenda?
Well, because listen, these guys. Okay, so I criticise largely the mainstream press, which is where I used to work. But of course, the social media, where everyone has been herded because there's so many lies and omissions. I mean, if you think about it, what you've got with the mainstream press nowadays is you've got journalists who are compromised. So you've got people who are there thinking much more about, should I do this story to keep my job or not, rather than is this a good thing for the public, like we used to do back in 1989, 90 through the first Gulf War. We were putting all sorts of interesting stuff on there, like, oh, the British government, it looks like the British government has been helping arms go to Saddam, and now we're at war with him. Last month we were sending arms to him. So that's missing completely now. But the thing is, the people that they put on as so-called experts are also very partial. So they keep people like me. They keep people like there's Craig Murray, for example. You'll never see him on the television, and you'll never hear him on the radio these days. He's a former ambassador. He's an expert in all these things. Former head of maritime law at the Foreign Office. You never hear him. So they keep these people. They exclude these people. They exclude people like the sociology professor David Miller, who can throw a fantastic amount of light on what's going on. But so you've got a double whammy going on in the mainstream press, with the journalists compromised, sitting there going, oh no, if I do the right thing, then I'm going to lose my job and my mortgage. Oh, and then you've also got these fake phony experts who are basically there to sell you something. So the mass media has been turned into this massive, it's like a massive advertising campaign for Armageddon, a massive advertising campaign for World War III, because the whole thing has been so carefully framed to exclude all the things that people really need to know. But then of course people like Musk come along. They know that everyone's going to get disillusioned with the mainstream press. They're going to go to Twitter, they're going to go to Facebook, etc. And these two are massively moderated. The whole groups are just destroyed at the press of a button. That's maybe 7 or 8, 10 years of content, of effort that people have put in, all gone by Zuckerberg. And so there really is, it's very difficult to find anywhere for people to go. What we tend to do is go to maybe Iranian news, maybe to Russian news to get another perspective. And you get very different perspectives from these places. Afshan Rattansi, I think, on RT, he's one of the people that I would have expected, if my career had continued, to be working with as a top guy at the BBC. But no, they're not allowed, these people. And so when it comes to the people like Musk, you can see what he's doing. He's enjoying this. Everybody who, exactly the same as on the mainstream media, but more subtle. People who are really good get decelerated. It's what we saw in the Twitter files. And it's not necessarily, it's not the American government anymore doing it. It's Musk himself. He's making sure that anybody that's really going to make a contribution doesn't get a chance to go viral. They go, and they can just press a few buttons at X and do that kind of thing, exactly as they do. And so our perceptions are being bent, I think, in a massive way. The things we really need to know are the things that the social media barons make sure that we never see.
So, final words on this topic, Tony. Our perceptions are being bent, you said, and perception is much more important than reality. There is no doubt about this. But is it a clash of civilization, or is it a war for resources? For which this divide and rule policy is being played.
Well, there's lots of layers to this, aren't there? For many years, people have been talking about oil. Everything is really about controlling the resources of oil, or maybe it's other minerals, maybe it's rare earth resources. I don't believe any of that. I think it's actually really a control for the hearts and minds of the population at the bottom of it. The idea is that they want people to think in a certain way which suits their purposes. And if you look at, say, the social credit policies in China and the increasing manipulation of the financial system with preparations for programmable money in the West, you can see actually that even though they're supposed to be opposites, there's a lot of similarities between the control mechanisms that are being used right across the world, and not a lot of difference, really. So it's an excellent question about what is the real, what is this really about? And I would say it's about hearts and minds. I mean, if you think about the way that history has been, we've had politics, which is about the head and about thinking, and we've had religion, which is about the heart. And I think that the secret rulers of the world, if you want to call them that, certainly the elites, the super rich who have pawns. And I love your introduction, by the way, with the chessboard. On both sides of the chessboard, they like to control both sides of the chessboard, and then they know, when you're looking for. I mean, just as an example, we had the sacking of Peter Mandelson in Britain last week, who was the American ambassador, friend of Jeffrey Epstein. Everybody thought at the time he was appointed, the guy's a lunatic. He's what are they doing appointing him? He's mates with Epstein. Everybody knew this, but who is it that turns up to excuse it on the BBC? Well, it's Richard Dearlove, the former head of MI6 and Bilderberger. So they're the people, they put their people out there in order to say, oh, it was a terrible decision. But actually, mate, it's your decision, isn't it? It's a little bit like this whole concept of the Antichrist appearing in the future. So you create the war, and then you step forward as the person, oh, I'm going to bring peace, everybody. So that's what I mean about the idea of the chessboard and game theory. We've probably not looked much into game theory, but this is, I think, absolutely at the core of the minds of the financial elite and the global elite. They're playing games with us. That's what they like to do. If they see everything as a game, then they believe they can win, and in fact, they can use all the AI to try and play that game for them to help them. And that's why I think there's been this $1 trillion a year for the last decade or so being invested into AI, because they know they can't rely on humans to help them, because humans don't want to help in mass murder, genocide, and maniacal plans, but the AI will.
That's a scary scenario, but that's not a part of our debate. But we are going to have a debate on that as well, about the AI revolution and what it really means and who are actually controlling it. And the world is being controlled by tech billionaires. So that's a discussion for some other day, maybe. But you said it is a battle of hearts and minds. Now, Tony, to control hearts and minds, you need influencers. And Charlie Kirk was one such influencer. Why couldn't the US or his security protect him? And what do you make out of his murder? And what do you make out of his murderer who has been caught?
Well, I'd say alleged murderer, because we're not really sure until the whole thing goes to trial. And even then, sometimes, that somebody is framed, as we had with Lee Harvey Oswald in the JFK assassination, which was actually done by a chap who's confessed to it, although, again, suppressed by them, called James Files, who was a hitman for the Chicago Mafia, who was down, and he's actually confessed to it. He's talked all about it, But anyway, people don't know about these things because it's suppressed by the mainstream press. You don't know what you don't know. But anyway, with Charlie, he clearly was he was veering away from supporting Israel. This is the reason I think he was killed. The question, of course, is it's not clear if he was ordered to do this, or if he was, specifically groomed online to do this, or that sort of thing, or if it was just the general culture of hatred that was generated around towards Charlie Kirk by mainly the trans lobby, seemed to hate him more than anything else, that actually caused this guy to pick up a gun and kill him, if it was indeed him. So I think that, to me, I think we have to understand there's different ways these things can happen. So, I'm shocked to see people reporting, by the way, from the march at the weekend. People are saying on camera, saying, I think Keir Starmer should be assassinated. Now, in my day, we would never have reported something like that. That piece of film would have gone off to the police, because, of course, this is incitement to murder, and it's a very serious crime. You don't report things like that. I've just reported it, so I'm a hypocrite. But this is what's happened nowadays.
It's already viral. It's already viral. Everybody's watching it. Yeah.
Well, I know, but you see, as a responsible journalist, you don't just spread assassination threats, do you? What you do is you say, "Hi, if you've got a responsible police who you trust," which that may be actually the issue here, that you hand it to the police. The guy's going to be arrested immediately for incitement to kill and incitement to murder. In fact, it would be quite an interesting and important trial. But no, it's just spread. It's just like clickbait, basically. So this is the way that the press and the social media has fallen. I think people like Musk relish this sort of thing. But anyway, back to Charlie. I mean, he was clear that Declassified, I think it was just the day after, or maybe 2 days after Kirk was assassinated, Declassified made it clear that Kirk had refused money from Netanyahu. So the way people like this carry on, I mean, his movement, Turning Point, started off as a grassroots movement. Obviously, then people come along and say, hey, I'd like to help you out. But they're often not just there to help you out, they're there to control and steer you. Very much like we were talking about earlier on with the British National Party Nick Griffin being steered into this pro-Israeli mode. So the very similar thing was going on with Charlie. So that declassified information from, actually, no, I think it was the Grey Zone, wasn't it? Published that. You can see and look at the details there, that what's going on here. And if you look at, I mean, you don't need to do that, actually. You can look at some of the recent interviews with Charlie Kirk, and you'll see he's saying things like, yeah, but it's a genocide. What do you think about that? When he interviews Ben Shapiro, what about ethnic cleansing in Gaza? You know, he's focusing on Gaza. He's also saying things like, well, it looks to me as if the Israeli army maybe was stood down on October the 7th. There was no soldiers around, apparently. He said, every time I wandered around, there were soldiers everywhere. But apparently no soldiers when Hamas turned up on the doorstep. These are the sorts of things which was, I think, was getting Charlie in all sorts of trouble with the Zionist lobby. They didn't like him at all. I think it's pretty clear. And but how that then translates into someone killing him to me is a bit of a mystery. It's still a mystery, you know, as to whether, because if you look at some of these killings, for example, the killings in Southport in Britain last year by this young teenager, a lot of online grooming goes on. So these people are brought in, and it's probably a good time to mention this group called the Order of Nine Angles, which does exactly this. What it does is it grooms usually young people, often people who are on antidepressants and who've got this kind of pent-up anger and hatred inside them. The antidepressant drugs are really very, very dangerous, and people don't necessarily realise this. And that, in order to persuade the person that this is going to be a cool thing and a good thing. And the Order of Nine Angles, what it does is it actually promotes people up through the organisation the more they kill. There is actually a brilliant book about them. It's a satanic Nazi group, which the former, well, when she was in opposition in Britain, the Home Secretary now she's gone on to the Foreign Office, but she was Home Secretary for the last year, Yvette Cooper, said we must ban this organisation. But then when she becomes Home Secretary, she forgets all about it, which is really strange. So Order of Nine Angles is a Nazi satanic group, and there's a very good, people are interested more in this because they should, of course, be banned. There is a very good book called Global Death Cult by William Ramsey that looks at many of the killings, and of course they're still going on today, that have been caused by this organisation. Usually it's in order to further some sort of agenda. So with the Southport riots, there was a whole lot of rumours about the killer being an illegal migrant, which caused riots all over the country at the time. With Charlie Kirk, I think it's just that this guy was going places. He was a Christian, anti-abortion, potential future Donald Trump. And when it happened, I thought this is a bit like the shootings in, I think it was 2011 in Utoya in Norway, where all of these young left-wing kids were on a holiday camp, and some guy, Anders Breivik, turned up with a high-powered rifle and killed, I think it was 70 children. So this is the future of Norway's political system on the left that's been completely massacred here. And that's exactly what was happening with Charlie, because he was going places. He was a potential senator, or highly likely to become a senator, extremely popular, and he was very persuasive on young people to take on old school Christian values, which is actually part of the war on terror, isn't it? It's the old-fashioned Judaism is being squashed by Zionism. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are trying to push out old school Islam. And the same is happening with Christian Zionism, the pro-genocide Christians, so-called Christians, pushing out people like Charlie Kirk. So it was very convenient for the Zionists that Charlie was dispatched in this manner.
So, final word. What do you make out of the Grey Zone report we are seeing, which says that Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu's funding offer, was frightened by pro-Israel forces before death, friends reveal? And this is a story by Grey Zone, by Max Blumenthal. And then Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was challenged, and he was asked this question, and he, of course, rubbished all these claims. And he said, there is no way we're going to do that. So I'm just going to put up a conspiracy theory. Mind you, it's a conspiracy theory, so it is a conspiracy theory. You can't blame me for spelling out a conspiracy theory. Maybe they couldn't control Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk wasn't coming on board with the Israeli lobby in the US, like all their congressmen and the senators. Most of them are, actually not all of them, but most of them are. And he was somebody who had a substantial following and a very emotional following as well. And that is why he was removed out of the way, achieving, killing two birds with one stone. Firstly, removing him out of their way because he was not partnering up with them, and secondly, to stir some sort of chaos and control through the chaos. I mean, that is actually what we are witnessing, are we not, Tony? That
I think the anti-Christian, the anti-Abrahamic faith, the anti-genuine Jewish, the anti-Muslim agenda is the chaos agenda. The idea is, you've got the atheists, etc. Now, I mean, I think it was Breitbart put out a horrific thing of all the trans people celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk. So this is what I was talking about before. It's the culture of it's okay to kill your political rivals. This has become almost the norm. What we've seen, of course, is the Israelis really starting this and pushing this with the murder of the Hamas leaders, with the murder of the Hezbollah leaders, with the murder of the Israeli leaders, these massive political decapitation strikes, assassinations. This has become, the culture has become that it's cool. This guy's a Nazi, anyone that can kill him is cool, is absolutely pernicious, and it is the chaos agenda, and it will bring down Western civilization and any civilization where it's allowed to flourish and thrive. And it amazes me that the police are, just not pouncing on these. But that's, they have other agendas. The police are, seems to be doing something completely different. So yes, it's, I think, completely tied to the whole Israel thing. And Kirk was a bit of a Trump, wasn't he? He didn't have Trump's money, he didn't have as much finance, but he certainly had masses of political capital and had a massive future. And it's tragic to see. And when you talk about Netanyahu's denial, right? Well, never believe anything until it's officially denied. that was the old royal anything to do with the royal family, in the old days. That's what we said.
Tony, you're trouble, man. You're trouble. So so moving forward to relatively related topic, since we're talking about Israel, and we have been discussing Israel and the Charlie Kirk murder, and it was the Israeli Prime Minister who denied, as you said, the attack on him, the involvement on the attack on him, and the Grey Zone report that he was scared of the Israelis. Well, that is one thing. But what happened in Qatar? What happened in Doha, where the Israeli missile attack or alleged Air Force attack hit Hamas, which was which was hosted by Qatar. What do you make out of that in the context that Qatar had the American defense umbrella, the leaky defense security?
Well, we need to see all these things. I think we need to see all these things as mafia threats. A bit like Charlie Kirk's murder is a threat to Trump. The Russians immediately came out and said that. Of course, it was ignored in the Western press. But this is a direct threat to Trump. So this attack on Qatar is a threat to the Qatari leadership. It's quite clearly the betrayal of the peace negotiations. It tells us there was never any intention to have peace, which I think most of us in journalism honestly know that the Netanyahu wants war. He needs war for his political survival. And so the other aspect of this, which I haven't heard reported, is the timing was interesting. So it came at the same time as just the day after, actually, the massive Epstein files had been released in the United States. And so instead of journalists poring over these great long lists of Epstein's pals, suddenly there's something else to talk about all day. Oh my God, the Israelis have done this. So maybe it was just literally a distraction.
And Tony, who's involved in Jeffrey Epstein files and all the the sexual scandal, we call the sexual trap scandal, honey trap, whatever you may like to call him?
Well, of course, Charlie Kirk, another thing, he had been calling this out, saying, hang on, this looks like a Mossad operation to me. And this is another reason why, of course, the Israelis didn't want him to carry on saying this sort of thing at these political rallies. Who's on the Epstein files? Well, everybody's on the Epstein files. This was, I would just say one thing about Prince Andrew. He is the one who everybody is sort of focusing on. Oh, gosh, look what he did. Yeah, I mean, both he was a victim and Virginia Giuffre, who was prostituted out to him. They were both victims of Ghislaine Maxwell, really. I think Epstein, in a way, is the side guy. Maxwell was running the operation. It's also the case that when he was in jail, I did a report with Don DeBar from ex-Pacifica Radio on this at the time when we found out about it. But the guy who was in the cell with Epstein was a cop killer, a multiple cop killer who was on death row. And it turns out that a few days later, we find out that, oh, well, he's not on death row anymore. So it could be that they just said to him, well, we'll take you off death row if you kill Epstein for us. Simple things like this tell you that the justice is not being served in these cases. And so Trump is absolutely right to order that all of these files be released, because what was happening was they were being cherry-picked one by one, just who they felt that they wanted to talk about. Very much like, I mean, at the moment in Britain, we've got a thing called the Spy Cops inquiry, where the Metropolitan Police were spying on people who weren't even criminals. They were environmental protesters, and they were infiltrating their lives. They were having children with them. But what the Spy Cops inquiry has been doing is just cherry picking. Oh, we want to tell you about this policeman. We want to tell you about that policeman. But they would never release all. Of course, what we need King Charles or Starmer to say, release all those files. I mean, if you're going to start dropping them out one by one to the press, you've got to release all of them if they're going to be leaked. So that's my attitude with the Epstein files. It was a honey trap. The idea is you get compromat on these people on Epstein Island, you film them, either underage boys or girls or whatever, and then you just put out someone like Andrew, like they did. Actually, she was overage in British law, and they were both victims of this sting. But Andrew is being hung out for the whole world to see, and of course, everybody that went to Epstein Island will look at Andrew and go, God, look what they've done to him. They've destroyed him. Maybe they'll destroy me if I speak out. I better do what I'm told. And this is a mafia blackmail operation run by the Israelis, in my view.
So, Tony, moving back to the Israeli attack in Doha, Qatar, a place which is hosting the U.S. bases, which has got world-class security infrastructure, and which has got almost and it is hosting the regional headquarters of the United States CENTCOM as well. And now.
And Al Jazeera is an extremely important part of what is that Qatar.
But it's part of the Abraham Accord as well. And the response has been very homeopathic, to say the least. I mean, they're not going to use all those defense umbrellas, and they're not going to use anything like that. But seeing the opportunity, trying to capitalize on it, the Pakistani Prime Minister, he dashed to Qatar, offering them a security umbrella. Now, if the American security umbrella is not working for Qatar, would the Pakistani security umbrella work for them. Just imagine. So there is all sort of circus going on in Doha. But do you think that Qataris who actually own almost the major icons in London and the biggest investor in the UK, and they've got investments in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and the Israelis got investments in Qatar. Do you think there was an understanding behind this attack, and they're just telling us another story, whereas behind closed doors there was an understanding already? And what do you make out of the security umbrella of the US and other countries like Pakistan offering these umbrellas
Well, look,
to
that's a
them?
great question. I wish we had this sort of thing asked on the live Sky News or BBC around the world, because that is the ultimate question. Did they know? And of course, these diplomatic channels often are used behind the scenes. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. Is that okay? Yes, it's okay. And we'll do a deal behind the scenes, a diplomatic deal of some sort, which the public are never privy to until sometimes a long time after the event. This happens. I think one of the best things you can do in situations like that, particularly with oil states and oil-rich states, is look at the oil price. So were the markets being spooked by this? So, is this like one attack? It might be more attacks. Is this going to affect the oil price? Because the markets always know the inside information. There's massive amounts of insider trading and insider dealing. It's completely like open season on this. And so if you look at the oil, I don't know what happened to the oil price last week but if the oil price just completely carried on as normal, then there was a deal done behind the scenes, and that they knew that this wasn't going to escalate any further.
Yeah. So the oil prices did not fluctuate too much. They
No, I
stayed.
don't know.
They didn't. So there was a deal. It means.
I think possibly, yeah. And there's a certain thing is kind of spoon fed out to the public, and it might be just as simple. I mean, I've really no idea about I'm not there in those. Love to be a fly on the wall. I'm sure you would too. But what we can do is just use a bit of educated guesswork from decades of experience of watching these events take place and unfold, and then often finding out afterwards. A little bit like the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. At the time everyone was shocked, but then we found, the Americans told Saddam, April Glasby, the ambassador, you can invade, no problem. Just we don't mind behind the scenes. But of course, it was a trap and a trick that Saddam Hussein fell into back in 1989. But so that with a bit of experience like this, I think you can kind of work out a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes.
So was it the case when Osama bin Laden was assassinated? I was a serving army officer, and I believe it to be the case. And I've got certain kind of inside information which will get me in further troubles with the American, with the Brits even, and with the Pakistanis. But I don't mind that. I'm already in so much troubles. What's a bit more of it? So what do you make out of the Osama bin Laden raid in Pakistan, after which Obama was re-elected as the president, as the leader of the free world? What do you make out of that?
Well, it was a bit like the theatre in the Falkland Islands, wasn't it, with Margaret Thatcher getting re-elected after that. So my understanding about bin Laden is he had some quite serious kidney illness around about 2000, 2001 when the 9/11 attacks happened. And it could be that he did not survive very long after that. I think it was the American hospital in Dubai that said that bin Laden was having a serious operation at the time. So where exactly he died, I'm not sure, but I think he probably was completely. There was this amazing hunt for bin Laden, wasn't there? Very dramatic.
I'll just leave the topic by throwing out an open question: that which were those two dead bodies flown out of the Special Services Group headquarters at Terbila, Pakistan, a 15 minutes flight away from where he was actually killed. There were two dead bodies which were flown from that airbase in a U.S. Army Chinook helicopter, which landed at the site before the so-called naval SEAL team attacked the site. And where is that SEAL team? What happened to them, by the way? So I'll just leave it at that. An open-ended question.
Well, listen. 9/11 is such an important event because we know Building 7 collapsed. this is just some basic problems, with massive problems with the whole narrative. But what people often miss, and one of the best people on this, by the way, if people are interested in reading up on it, is Christopher Bollin, an old photographer friend of mine who I used to cover the Bilderberg conferences with, did a book called Solving 9/11. And he looks at some interesting things, such as the flight with all these Israelis on, which is the only airliner that left the United States on 9/11, special permission. I don't know, they could have stayed a day. That would have been, less obvious. But no, all these Israelis decided after the 9/11 attacks, they were going to jump into a plane and head back, and they got special permission to head back. And my former prime minister was over there at the time, which many people don't realize. And, things like the threats to Bush when he was in his aircraft, Angel is next. So unless you do X and Y, your plane is going to be shot down now. So there's a lot about the 9/11 attacks to unravel, but the main point was to set the scene for the 21st century. It seems to me this is the project for the new American century, is we're going to be going anywhere we want in the world where we think there's some sort of enemy. This is the new America, the Pentagon, the 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to go after all these. And of course, this has led to where we are today with Gaza, the balkanization of the Middle East, and the actual fueling and helping of this horrific, atrocious terror state that not only are the Israelis themselves criticizing, but the whole world is starting to say now this has got to stop, including, some wonderful Israeli composers speaking at the Royal Albert Hall as part of the BBC Proms. No, he's a conductor, not a composer. But, there is a whole climate out there now pointing at Gaza and saying, stop this guy, stop him now. Otherwise, this is going to spread like a cancer, like a virus across the world.
Yeah, well, once you were talking about 9/11, and once Michael Moore made Fahrenheit 9/11, he was being rubbished by everyone. And he was, all the efforts and all the money was thrown at to turn it into a conspiracy theory. But now we've got people like Tucker Carlson speaking about it, and we can only pray and hope for his safety. But moving forward, you talked about the 7 countries, so the Pakistan is part of those 7 countries, isn't it, Tony?
No, I don't think so. No, I think it was, if I can remember, it's Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran. Anyway, so it was Wesley Clark speaking actually around the time of the 9/11, not long after the 9/11 attacks, the General Wesley Clark.
Pakistan is, Tony, a nuclear country. Why would they not go after Pakistan? I know the answer. I want to pick your brains up about it.
Well, I mean, you don't go after nuclear countries, do you? I mean, that doesn't make sense. You're going to just
countries whose regime is cooperating with you and who can be controlled. And
yeah, I think that may be why Pakistan wasn't on the list. I don't remember exactly. You may be right, honestly, but it
was actually on the list. There was this U.S. Defense General published. It was a Lieutenant Colonel. I don't remember his name.
Wesley Clark is the guy, General Wesley Clark. Yeah, he just gave an interview where he talked about being told by one of the top Pentagon guys. I can't remember now. It's not sort of. It's Rumsfeld. Could be Rumsfeld about this, but this is a clear plan to balkanize the Middle East, a little bit like happened with the attack on Yugoslavia in the 1990s, to destroy it basically, and then to use that to expand into a greater Israel. This has been the plan for a very, very long time, and of course, it's an absolutely horrific, disgusting thing that needs to be exposed. I think it was one of the U.S. generals in one of the just trying to remember what it's called. There's an actual plan for it. I mean, you can look it up and see this is what they're planning to do. Maps of the old Middle East and the new Middle East. So this has been on the cards there for a long time, and one of the main groups of people pushing it have been CENTCOM, as you said, based in Qatar. So that's what this has been about over years. But of course, it goes a long way back, and it goes back to the hearts and minds. The idea is to occupy the Holy Land, occupy the areas of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and then sort of try and control that bit of real estate to control the hearts and minds of the world.
Yeah, well, coming back to the region, why I'm talking about Pakistan, there is an active plan, and you were rightly just pointing out about the Balkanization of Pakistan. Balkanization of Pakistan sets very well in this plan because Pakistan is at a geostrategical strategic place which links up India or Asia with Central Asia, where the energy corridor is, and then the most important thing is China. And we've only got 10 minutes left. You had already warned me. So coming back to the final topic of the Chinese yin yang, Tony, firstly, Pakistan is playing both sides, and they're trying to travel on both the ships at the same time, which is not possible for very long, but they've somehow been managing it for 75 years. Do you think they would be able to manage it, firstly? And secondly, do you think Chinese are in a position to offer themselves as an alternative to the United States in the Great Power
Well,
Rivalry?
look, this is why Imran Khan is in jail, because he chose a far more sensible route, which is ally yourself with Russia, ally yourself with a third force and a surviving third force. This is what any sensible country, I think, in the world will be now looking at, is you need to be somehow linking up with, I mean, the coming conflagration, however it comes out, is obviously going to be somehow between the United States and China, United States with Europe against China. The Russians are this third force. They're not really in any of these camps 100%. In fact, although they're very friendly with the Chinese, because the Americans and now the Europeans have been lobbing these long-range missiles into Russian cities and have provoked this war in Ukraine, as everyone who studies it will understand. The invasion by the Russians took place to prevent an invasion by the Ukrainian army, which was about to invade the Donbass. It killed 15,000 people in the Donbass in the previous 7 years since the coup. And the Russians knew exactly what they were planning. And so they said, right, we're going to have to send our soldiers in to protect these Russian-speaking people. And that's exactly what they did. So that's the facts of the matter. And anyone that watches these things around the world, intelligence people, etc., that inform their political and military leaders about what's going on, can see that Russia is really the only, in a way, it's the Russians, the Russians' finest hour. Because, like the British were talked about in 1939, the finest hour, Winston Churchill's speech, taking on the Nazis, the first country to really declare war on Germany. That was their finest hour. That was Britain's finest hour. This, I think, is the Russians' finest hour. What they're doing is they're confronting the British, mainly the British over Ukraine and NATO, and they're saying, no, you're not going to carry on coming this way. And in fact, this has sort of happened before, hasn't it? The Europeans, for a long, long time, have been trying to push their influence eastwards, whether it was through the Crusades, whether it's Napoleon trying to invade Moscow and failing miserably. And in fact, there was such a failure that they had to send their people over in the other direction, over to the Americas, Columbus and Cabot, to discover and kill all those poor Native Americans in another genocide, far worse than what we've seen in some ways in Gaza. Even though it wasn't live streamed, it's still nearly 100 million Native Americans were killed after the trips of the Europeans over in that direction. And so this is an old struggle, I think, between the Russians and the Europeans. And the Americans are now, the Kissinger doctrine has kind of kicked in with Trump, and they're saying, no, we don't want to have a nuclear war with Russia. And who would, except a complete lunatic and maniac like Tampon Charlie, who's the British king, and his Privy Council and his horrific war cabinet, who are now, it seems, much more obsessed with pointing everybody towards the bad guys over in Moscow, rather than looking at his own record in Britain, where he's, by banning the Palestine Action, for example, the number of arrests for terrorism in Britain have gone up about 700, 800, 900% just in the last few months. So he's calling peaceful Quakers who are just trying to support peaceful direct action against genocide. He's calling them terrorists, and he expects us to have any sort of political survival in the future or even to have any respect around the world. So it's kind of almost like, I think, an end game really for this Labour government. Slowly, they're just digging themselves deeper and deeper into a hole. But yeah, I mean, Pakistan is what you asked me about. Pakistan needs people like Imran Khan, because he was quite clear. Let's stay out of this massive battle going on between the Chinese and the Americans. Let's ally ourselves with someone, who's got a serious Abrahamic faith behind them, not which is a dualistic good versus evil concept. It's not like the yin yang you get from the Indians and the Chinese. Oh, you've got to have evil, you've got to have good, you've got to keep it in balance. And the polytheism, there's loads of different gods, go out and choose whichever one you want today, or for your family, and light a little candle for them in a shrine. No, there's a much bigger picture here going on. And I think those of us from the Jewish, Muslim, and in fact, there are several other traditions and Christian traditions that follow basically what is the Torah and the Ten Commandments, can see what's going on. Even the people that are trying to pretend that they're the good guys, in everyone's heart, there's either somewhere between public spiritedness and selfishness. And the selfish ones are very good, particularly with the help of people like Elon Musk, social media, and the mainstream press, in coming across as the good guys. That's what they love to do. And by that, they are dividing and ruling, I think, billions of people in the world today quite successfully. And that's my message is, no, don't take any notice of that. Do understand that it really is a battle of good and evil. And ultimately, this is going to be decided. Both Muslim traditions in the Quran and the biblical traditions in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, and in Daniel, in the Jewish tradition, all talk about this coming to a head in the future. And it may be not too near future either. In the Holy Land, the Battle of Armageddon and the Dajjal they talk about the Mahdi, they talk about the Antichrist, the false prophet in the Bible. But all this stuff is quite clearly coming to a head, where the bad guys' plans start to fail and their chickens start to come home to roost. Their arrogance gets the better of them.
Finally, Tony, a realpolitik question. Do you think the Pakistani and the British establishment would be able to successfully balance out the relationship between China and the US?
The British establishment, I'm afraid, is wedded in to the bad agenda, the chaos agenda at the moment. Whether it's going to be possible to nudge Tampon Charlie out of the way and Starmer out of the way, I mean, I honestly think, our British establishment is so riddled with the Zionist lobby at the moment. I mean, everybody has been being pushed out who is, even Alan Duncan, who was a Conservative Foreign Office Minister. The Israeli embassy got him sacked, got him pushed out. Loads of money, bribes are paid, this sort of thing. This is all in the Al Jazeera film, not the BBC, explaining all this stuff. So I think it's a bit of a lost cause, the British establishment, because it's very locked in. If you go look very closely at the City of London, you'll see all these livery companies. You'll see all these orders of knighthood. This is where they hide. They love status, but actually they're incompetent.
And the Pakistani establishment is following suit, do you think? Because they are being influenced by the Pakistani military establishment is being influenced. They're being influenced by the British establishment. At least that is what they like to think with the flags. You've talked about knighthood, so they are still carrying the flags of King George Victor's own and Prince Albert Victor's own. That is the Pakistani military establishment for you. So do you think they are still they're following suit, or they're doing a bit?
You've got a tug of war going on in Pakistan right now, which is between the Imran Khan faction and the Western establishment, pro-war, pro-World War III establishment, which has got its tentacles in the ISI, etc., at the top of Pakistani society. So I've got a crystal ball here. I think it's absolutely crucial that Pakistani society understands how important Imran Khan's mission was and is, and all of his followers is, and they absolutely have to get back control of their nation if they want that nation to survive, if they want the people not to be dragged in to World War III.
Yeah, well, the link between the British and the Pakistani establishment, Tony, I'm just going to just dwell upon that. And as my closing argument, why I've asked this particular question is because the Commonwealth Election Observation Mission for the February 2024 election, which was massively rigged, and the vote for Imran Khan was stolen and he was later thrown in the jail. He was already in the jail, by the way. And the massive rigging process by the Pakistani military was noted down by the Commonwealth report and the European Union election observation mission. The European Union election observation mission also suppressed the report and they have not released it so far. Only the Commonwealth report has been leaked by some whistleblower to Dropsite News. We covered it quite extensively yesterday, and you can see it on the screen. The story was published. Rigging in Pakistan election may have unlawfully kept candidates out of office. Offers the suppressed report. The question is, why was these reports suppressed? And even after more than 1.5 years later, the reports have still been suppressed. The full reports have now been leaked. Why the British establishment and the European Union establishment is supporting the Pakistani military junta and suppressing 250 million Pakistanis? And how do you expect the Pakistani population, the masses, 90% of the Pakistanis, 80%, more than 80% who voted for Imran Khan, to see you in a favorable light? It is something for you to think about. And
Look,
any
look,
closing?
let me just explain what I think needs to happen in Pakistan. The leadership in the army needs to understand they've been conned. They're being conned. And the people who are being conned never like to admit it. But let me just talk about two things. I mentioned one before, which is this secret satanic Nazi organization, the Order of Nine Angles. This is what is used in many of these assassinations and terrorist attacks. It's used as a tool of MI5 and all these other sort of Mossad and these kinds of intelligence services. Many people at the highest echelons of the intelligence services and the military are not even aware of its existence. I'd also point out the history of false flag attacks in Europe, which was part of something called Operation Gladio, which happened in the 1980s mainly, where the attacks on so-called left-wing attacks on places around Europe, including mostly Italy, but also in Germany, Belgium, etc., were actually carried out by right-wing elements of mercenaries and mostly ex-military. Operation Gladio. And there's a brilliant series on Gladio, one of the best documentaries, and all of your leadership in Pakistan need to watch it. A 3-part series from 1993, which was screened on the BBC, part of the Time Watch series, just before the BBC started kind of going dark, basically, and not putting out anything like this anymore, by Alan Frankovich, where it just takes you through the way that terrorist attacks, rather than being done by the people you thought they were actually being done mostly by fascists. There's a brilliant interview with Vincenzo Vinciguerra. He was in prison when he's being interviewed by Frankovich, where he says in 1945, World War II finished and World War III began. And we were World War III. And this is in the 1980s, 70s, 80s. Bomb attacks blamed on the left-wing factions, blamed on the Soviet Union, which were actually carried out by fascist elements within NATO. And so if people really want to understand what's been going on in the post-war modern world, have a good old look. Your Pakistani colleagues over there need to have a good old look at the Operation Gladio series from 1993. Time Watch, 3-part series, is 3 hours of riveting stuff about who's really behind terror attacks. And then also a close look at William Ramsey's book, The Global Death Cult, to look at who is also carrying out things like these assassinations and other atrocities, and how in their little cults, the satanic Nazi cults, they're actually being rewarded for doing these things by maybe being let off ultimately, from taken off of death row, this sort of thing. And they're promised that there will be, a hero in the cult. And this is often done with young kids a fragile ego. The final thing I'll say about Charlie Kirk is that Tyler Robinson, who's the alleged killer, he was shacking up with some trans guy in the months beforehand, who apparently has been very cooperative with the police. But the connection with the trans agenda, with all these trans people celebrating, calling Charlie Kirk a Nazi, he's the absolute opposite of a Nazi. So this is the sort of thing through the media and through the intelligence services who keep actually a very, very close eye on these groups like the Order of Nine Angles, and they protect them. But no one is supposed to know about them, which is why I'm telling you about them right now.
Well, thank you so very much for a very candid discussion, and I hope if the Pakistani military strategists can see beyond their nose, they'll take Tony Gosling's advice quite seriously.
Please God, I hope they do, yeah. Because, the future of millions depends on these guys getting the right information to do their job.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for this fabulous session. And thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching us. And please share this video. This will be available and you're watching it. This will be available publicly on the 16th of September at 5 p.m. British summer time. Take care. Thank you, Tony.
Okay, Adil Raja, bless you, man, and your audience.
Bless you too, Tony. Enjoy your holidays. Enjoy Croatia. See you once you're back.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Cheerio.